Whenever I mention a comparison between these two players and a couple of reasons why, I usually get a couple of flack or hate talk or smack directed towards me, something along the lines of, Randy, you don't know what you're talking about. You're simply a Vikings fanboy. You're a Vikings homer. You don't know football. Shut the hell up. And now, instead of just mentioning this with a couple of reasons why, we're actually going to do a deep dive, a final deep dive in which I make the final case of Stefon Diggs is the poor man version of, and actually, let's switch it up a little bit. Let's actually upgrade him. Stefon Diggs is the middle class version of Antonio Brown. Let's do it. It's actually really crazy how similar these two players are, even on the come up from where they were to how they got to where they are right now. In the case of Antonio Brown, he was a 6th-round draft pick, 195th overall out of Central Michigan by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Compare that to Stefon Diggs, selected in the 5th round, 146th overall out of the University of Maryland by the Minnesota Vikings. The draft profile for both players, really similar. They lack the size and they lack the strength to beat physical corners. They're going to have to beef that up. Otherwise, they're not going to be really effective. And now you can make the argument, whereas before, just like in basketball, whereas in the olden days, really not the olden days, but early 2000s, late 90s, 80s, even before that, where you need the size, you need the strength to basically outmuscle your opponents in order to make plays. Now, in this era of the sport, of both sports, basketball and football, skill usurps everything. And these two players, Stefon Diggs and Antonio Brown, they exemplify just that. The obvious trait between the two is simply speed. Both Antonio Brown and Stefon Diggs, forget all the intricate route running. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Worst case scenario, they can run a fade route or a fly route and just blow by the entire secondary. Of course, speed isn't everything, because in case of the Minnesota Vikings, Troy Williamson was arguably the fastest player in franchise history. The problem was he couldn't catch the damn ball. Both players are superior route runners. They're easily 2 of the top 5 in the NFL. When you think about the traditional wide receiver, and just naturally speaking, when you're going from one direction to another, when you need to change directions, typically the receiver, they usually give a signal, not intentionally, of course, but they usually slow down, and you can tell their hips suddenly change, and it gives a signal off to the secondary. Antonio Brown and Stefon Diggs are so great at changing their direction that they maintain their stride in doing so. So suddenly you don't even realize it, and all of a sudden, that one little split second, if you're not keeping up with them, that one little split second where they make their break and your footwork is off as a cornerback, it's curtains. It's over.
Oh, okay, I see you, baby. What? Bye-bye.
You're not always going to be able to break your route and have that separation that you're looking for every single time as an NFL wide receiver. Some of the things that separates the top upper echelon receivers from the lower tier is being able to make those tough catches. Brown and Diggs are both great at that as far as catching the contested coverage passes. They're really good at ad-libbing and adjusting, doing whatever it is that's necessary to put their body and their hands in position to make those tough catches. The next common factor between Brown and Diggs is once they get the ball in their hands and it's open space, you can forget about it. They basically turn on the turbo, kind of like Fast and the Furious when they turn on NOS, nitrous oxide. Pew! Obviously, they both have great footwork, but what really stands out about that is their ability to keep their feet in bounds on those tight window passes on the sideline. And the reason why you should really give the respect to Stefon Diggs that he rightfully deserves is that he's been doing this the whole time with 4 different quarterbacks. Stefon Diggs and Antonio Brown, man, talent-wise, they're really not that far off.